The Panthers clean out their locker rooms on Sunday morning following a heartbreaking loss on Saturday night against the Rams. But the biggest news to come out of locker room cleanout day was that Ejero Evero will be returning for his fourth season as the Panthers defensive coordinator. We'll react to that news right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers all throughout the offseason, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, just because the regular season is over. Just because the postseason trip for the Panthers is over does not mean that this podcast stops. We're here every single day, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. On Sunday morning, following the Panthers' heartbreaking 34-31 loss against the Rams that finished off their 2025 season, I was right back inside Bank of America Stadium for 4.5 hours as the Panthers cleaned out their lockers. We got to talk to some players one final time as they may be departing from Carolina for the foreseeable future, if not as permanently. And also, we got to speak to Dave Canales about a couple of things. So we'll go over some of the things that I heard and got to talk to guys about on Sunday, including that the new standard has been set here in Carolina. Ikem Ekwonu, serious knee injury. That will be a big concern for the Panthers heading into the offseason. But the biggest concern I think that you, the Panther fan, has is that Ejero Evero is returning for another season as the Panthers defensive coordinator. Now, there was some confusion on Sunday when we spoke to Dave about this because I was of the impression, and a lot of people were, that Ejero's contract was going to be up after this season. Maybe he'd have a couple of more weeks under contract, but that his deal was set to be done after 3 years as the Panthers coordinator, which would mean that the Panthers would not have to fire him. He simply would just not have his contract renewed if they chose to do that, but there would at least be a conversation after the way things ended on that final drive on Saturday night, and really the way things have played out this past season, last season, as Dave has been the head coach in Carolina, that they would have a comprehensive review of whether he was the right guy for them moving forward. And the question was asked just about Ejero, about his contract, and how things stood there, and whether he would be the coordinator next season. And this is what Dave Canales had to say.
I mean, I have complete trust in Ejero. Love the way that he's brought this group to play quality football together. And, he's got my full support and love our scheme, love what we do there. And, getting our guys to play together when we execute this scheme, it's really difficult, to play against. And the guys have found a way to play together, communicate together, and really, like you saw last night in glimpses, just like the style of play that we're looking for. The big hits, the tackling, the coverage on the back end and all that, and the rush at times, and the pressure packages, the different things that he was able to do to create rush, to create pressure for quarterbacks. I just love where we're headed that way. And as always, with all of our schemes, we'll look at it and we'll continue to evolve. We'll continue to push the envelope and move forward from there.
Dave Canales has complete trust in Ejero Evero as his defensive coordinator here in Carolina. I know that you do not, and I found it interesting, him talking about their ability to rush the passer. That has not been the case. They ranked last in the NFL in pressure percentage this season, just like they did a year ago, and also they were one of the bottom teams when it comes to sacks. So I don't know necessarily what he is seeing there, but Ejero is coming back. And also the contract situation, that was the biggest thing that was confusing, because we were all under the impression that, again, it was a 3-year deal, and there had been no announcement that a deal had been reworked. So Dave gave us some clarity on how exactly that all came about.
No, we had conversations beforehand about his contract and his future going forward there. So it just, that'll come out whenever it does.
So did he get an extension when you were hired?
I can't remember the exact dates of it.
But since you've been hired, he has signed an extension. Is that fair?
Yes.
And to be clear, he'll be your defensive coordinator next season.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So 100%, absolutely. Ejero Evero will be the defense coordinator, as I asked Dave Canales there on Sunday, and Dave can't really pinpoint when an extension was signed, just knows that it happened and that he has complete trust in Ejero, and it will be announced at some point, yet it was never announced. Now, since that happened, Joe Person of The Athletic, who was asking about just, hey, we knew it was a 3-year deal. Now, apparently, he has more time left. What exactly is going on here? He reported that Ejero Evero is signed through the end of the 2027 season. At least we know of that right now. It's not been announced by the Panthers, but it's being reported by Joe that Ejero's contract ends after the 2027 season. So he's under contract not just for this upcoming season, but also next season as well. And I'm guessing you're not loving that fact. Here's the thing for me, and we'll go over these numbers in a moment, but here's the thing for me. As I told y'all last season when I laid out the case for and against Ejero Evero return to Carolina, and then we found out, I believe, that next day after that episode that he would be returning for his 3rd season as Panthers defensive coordinator. The case for was that Dave Canales was going to stand by his man. All of 2024, as the Panthers had the worst defense in franchise history, one of the worst defenses in NFL history, he talked about how he loved this scheme. So if it's not the scheme, then it's got to be the personnel or it's got to be the execution. And they went out and they added better personnel, and I think they've gotten better execution this past season. He told you that I like what Ejero does. I think he's the right guy for us. And throughout this season, when asked about the defense, he continued to stand 10 toes down on how much he loved the scheme and what they were building here with Ejero and that defense. So while it could be surprising, I mean, it's certainly more alarming, I would think, for you. It cannot be a surprise because if you're paying attention, if you're willing to listen, which a lot of you are not, might I add, you would have heard Dave basically point that this was happening. Now, a big surprise is that he had been extended, and at no point in time had that been announced by the team or had been reported by anyone in the Panthers media or nationally that had happened. So that's really what caught a lot of people in that room, including myself, off guard, is that he has 2 more years left on his deal when we thought that he had like 2 more days, let alone maybe 2 more hours left on his deal as the Panthers DC. So Ejero Evero will be back. Now you look at the defensive improvement from 24 to 25. They went from being last in the NFL in total defense, that's yardage, where they allowed 404.5 yards per game, to 16th, right there smack down middle in the NFL, allowing 327.2 yards per game. They went from last in yards per play, allowing 6 yards per play, to 20th, allowing 5.5 yards per play in 2025. They went from being last in points per game, allowed the most ever in the history of the NFL at 31.4, to 22.4. So 9 full points less per game, which is a significant jump, yet they're still only 15th in the NFL this past season. They went from last in EPA per play to 22nd, last in success rate to 16th. So they've gone from being the worst defense to a very middle of the road defensive unit this past season. And as we saw, that was good enough with even an offense that left a lot to be desired to get to the playoffs. Now, being in the NFC South has a lot to do with that, but they did beat the Packers. They did beat the Rams in the regular season, 2 huge wins for them that helped them get to this point. I don't think that a middle-of-the-road defense combined with what they had offensively this past season gets them to this point again later on this year in 2026, especially when you look at the schedule, which we'll talk about later on here on the show. Now, since Ejero Evero has arrived, the Panthers are 23rd in total defense, allowing 341.9 yards per game. They're 24th in yards per play, allowing 5.5 yards per play, which they gave up this past season as well on average. They're 30th in the most points per drive for their opponent and opponent touchdowns over the last 3 years. They're 30th in EPA per play. They're 30th in success rate. So they have been a bottom third defense throughout his entire tenure. And this league apparently is a meritocracy. It's a results-based business. And the results have told you that while Ejero's coordinated this defense, they have been among the worst in the NFL, and one year, the worst in the history of this league when it comes to scoring defense. So that is something that I don't think can be ignored, but also those numbers lack context. They lack the context of that first season personnel wasn't really great. You have Brian Burns, you have Frankie Louvu. Outside of that, I mean, JC was banged up. You didn't have a ton of guys. I mean, Jeremy Chin was banged up, but didn't really seem to be a scheme fit. They brought in Von Bell. That didn't really work. There was just things that did not work out for them. And also, you look at the offense and how poor it was in 2023. That was not conducive to playing complementary football, and that led to that defense where, while it looked better on game day on paper, it was like 25th, 26th in EPA. And when looking at DVOA and things like that. So, yeah, total defense-wise wasn't that bad. But when you actually look at the advanced analytics, it wasn't a great defense. In the next season, while they brought in guys like Jadeveon Clowney to replace Brian Burns, and they brought in some other players and all that, still can get up the passer, couldn't get up the field. You lose Derek Brown, which is a huge piece to what they had, did not nearly have the kind of depth on the defensive line they had this season. They were awful. But then this year, you have Derek Brown back. You have JC playing all those games again. You have Mike Jackson. You add in Trevon Merrick. You add in Bobby Brown III. You add in Turk Wharton. Linebacker play was still banged up again this season like it was in 2024 when Josie Jewell missed a lot of time. And also when you saw Shaq Thompson miss time, Trevin Wallace missed some time, and Trevin missed time again this year. They got better personnel-wise. They were healthier. And you look at the numbers, it was a better defense. So while just when you look at the numbers on paper that lack context, it clearly shows you things have not been great defensive for Carolina. When you have watched it play out, I don't think things were great that year one. Things were awful year two. Things were a lot better this year. But were they good enough for him to be back in another season? Well, it was already taken care of before the season, which meant that things would have had to been extremely bad, like they were in 24, for this to not have been the decision that Dave Canales made, which I find to be very interesting, that this is how things played out, that they secretly extended him, and it probably wasn't really a conversation, even though they'll continue to review things over the coming days. We'll see if there's any sort of changes as far as the position coaches, but as Dave said, he has complete trust in Ejero Evero to be his DC again in 2026. Now, Dave, will you be back as the play caller this upcoming season? I asked him that, and we'll get that answer in just a moment on Locked On Panthers, and also take a look at some of the key injuries the Panthers will be dealing with heading into this offseason here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for. Trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your posts at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your posts to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a higher than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us are looking at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way, and there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you could make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees a full conversation thread, which makes makes replies faster and more personal. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Ejero Evero coming back for his 4th season as Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator, his 3rd season under Panthers head coach Dave Canales in that same role. Dave apparently addressed Ejero's contract at some point prior to the season. We do not know exactly when that happened, but it has been reported by Joe Person of The Athletic that the deal that Ejero has signed is through the end of the 2027 season, meaning that he contractually will be the DC this season and next season. Now, understand this. Ejero is getting interviewed for head coaching positions, looking at some of the reporting from some of the NFL insiders out there. Ejero Evero has been at least requested to speak with the Raiders and also to speak with I believe, the Atlanta Falcons as well. Yes, the Atlanta Falcons and the Raiders about their head coaching positions. Now, we looked at a couple years ago when he interviewed for the head coaching job in Carolina the first time around. Frank Reich got it. He got interviews that cycle. The next cycle, after Frank was fired, he interviewed for this job again, I believe, and then also got the interview for other head coaching jobs. And then after last year, when they were the worst defense in the league, obviously no one wanted to speak to him because, well, when you coordinate the worst defense in the league, you're probably not in line for a promotion. Typically, you get fired. But Dave stood by his man, whether you like that or not. The defense did get better this season because Derek Brown was healthy, J.C. Horn was healthy, and they had better personnel. But will they take that next step next season? Which I would think that, considering where they want to go and some of the additions that they probably will make and definitely need to make this offseason, if this does not get back to being a top 15 defense, I think across the board, it's time to probably really make a change. And we'll see if Dave does that. But Dave has kind of stood by his staff so far. So he's staying by Ejero. They made some changes to the defensive coaching staff last year. So it wasn't like they stood pat and did nothing at all. They made those changes. Will they make any more? We'll see. But right now, they're staying with Ejero, and that's how it is. Dave apparently also appears to be staying as the offensive play caller. I asked him on Sunday whether that would be the case, and this is what he had to say.
Yes, right now, and again, all of these questions and all stuff that we're going to be talking about, as a staff coming up in the next couple of days, trying to get a chance to regroup on the whole season and how it came out. We're always going to look for ways to try to improve what we're doing.
They're going to look for ways to try to improve what they're doing. So while right now the plan is for him to continue calling plays, that could always change. I came out after that game against Tampa and really felt like they needed to go out and get an experienced play caller. I had someone hit me up and say, hey, should they go get Darrell Bevel? That's the same guy who decided not hand Marshawn Lynch the ball in the Super Bowl, and Russell Wilson was intercepted by Malcolm Butler. So that would be a big old no for me, although he would be an experienced play caller. Things haven't really worked out well in his past stops after leaving Seattle. There are names out there that we've gone over, like Kingsbury's interviewing for coaching jobs, head coaching jobs. That is Mike McDaniel's interviewing for head coaching jobs, and Todd Monken, he's available as well. Now, he admitted he did not do a good enough job coaching Lamar Jackson, so I don't know if that would make sense. I felt like that would have been maybe the right thing for Carolina, but I can also see the other side of things, and it's not me talking out both sides of my mouth and changing my opinion on this, because I still feel like the best thing for the Panthers probably long-term would be to get somebody else, because I've just seen at this point in time enough to believe that Dave is just not at the level of the guy opposite of him on Saturday night, even though the offense was really good throwing the ball, and he's not at the level of Kyle Shanahan. Now, how many guys are, but like Kevin O'Connell has proven to be a hell of a play caller. Ben Johnson, we know, is a hell of a play caller. I mean, Matt LaFleur, things fell apart for the Packers. He's been a good one. Like, these are guys in the NFC. Now, in the NFC South, there's not a coaching staff right now in Atlanta. Kellen Moore, you saw the Eagles offense this past year. Clearly, that guy knows what he's doing. So that's a concern with New Orleans and what they're building, a team you couldn't beat this past season. And then you also look down at Tampa. They're going to get a new OC, as Josh Grizzard could not carry on what Dave Canales did and what Liam Cohen did. And Liam did a great job in Jacksonville this year. You're just seeing all over the league which are the guys who can actually be a head coach and play caller and which ones can't. And I feel like Canales has done a better job than like the Nick Siriannis of the world, but I just don't know if that's the right decision that he's making right now, but it could change. It's the hiring cycle right now. They could change things, but that is his plan. And as I said, plans can change. And you look at the last game, the offense, I mean, they scored 31 points. So there's a pretty good argument that, all right, let's let things continue to go on. And also just the continuity there with Dave being the play caller again, having Bryce as the quarterback again for the third season with them together. And typically you see that leap from quarterbacks in year 2 to year 3. Maybe that's going to happen this year with Bryce as I kind of wash away what happened year 1 of Frank Reich, getting fired after 11 games, going from Frank to Thomas Brown to Frank to Thomas Brown again as the offensive play callers. Too many cooks in the kitchen, that being a real issue for the Panthers in 2023, where things were finally stable this year with Dave and with Bryce. And let's see that relationship grow and see Dave continue to trust Bryce as very clearly with T-Mac and Jalen Coker, he has guys to throw to. Let him do that. Let him do what he did on Saturday night. Let him do what he did in Atlanta and not try to pull back the reins on him like you had to do early on because you didn't trust him. I don't think that should be an issue moving forward, but we'll see how that plays out. But I really felt like they could have benefited. He could have benefited in particular from going out there and getting another offensive play caller. Like, I think he's a good coach. Clearly, he's a good head coach, taking a 2-win team and getting him to 8 wins in 2 seasons and getting him to the playoffs and being competitive on Saturday night. I just think like his overall rating among the fan base, which, I mean, obviously doesn't matter at the end of the day, would be a lot higher if he had someone else calling plays. And I guess they had somebody to scapegoat aside from Dave at this point in time. But yeah, man, that's what he's going to do. So we'll see how that plays out for him moving forward into this upcoming season. And if that truly ends up being the best decision, I will say he came out when he first got here and talked about being smart running the football. While they've been that, they have not been effective at running the football. They were not effective at all in the final 9 games of this past season. They were really not that great. I think last year in 2024 and his 1 year in Tampa, they were awful at running the ball. So schematically, when he does his evaluations of things, he's going to have to find a way to scheme up some better run calls this upcoming season in 2026. And maybe the offensive line being healthy would help as well. But that's just some area that certainly needs to improve as far as it goes with Dave and this offense moving forward. But he will maintain play calling duties as of this moment. Of course, they could change. The hiring cycle is going on right now. If someone comes available, he thinks makes more sense. They look at the season as a whole and think, okay, maybe it's not the best thing for me operationally to do that. Maybe it will change, but right now, that is the plan. And right now, there are some real concerns about the offensive line as far as the left tackle position goes. Ickey Ekwonu ruptured a patellar tendon and is likely going to miss a decent amount of time to start next season. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. That's where Gusto comes in to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from the one place without the hassle or hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. Gusto's automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposit save me hours every week. And knowing you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you the real peace of mind. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonnfl and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/lockedonnfl. One more time, that's gusto.com/lockedonnfl. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple playoff boosts you can apply to the bets you like the most. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So the biggest 2 piece of news items come out from Sunday's locker room cleanout day is that Dave Canales will be back calling plays again. At least that's the plan here in Carolina in 2026. Ejero Evero apparently had his contract extended through the end of the 2027 season and will be back again this upcoming season as Panthers defensive coordinator, despite the fact the Panthers have been one of the worst defenses in the league since he's been the coordinator the last 3 seasons. But I guess that lacks context of who was out there and who wasn't and all of that. But we've watched it. Hasn't been great. And he's coming back again despite the way things played out on Saturday evening. And that is a big concern. And there was also the whole Princely Umanmielen deal on Sunday. Full disclosure, I was not in that scrum. I did see the video put up by Vast I Heard of Carolina Blitz of her asking about how things played out on Sunday and the lack of a pass rush they had this season. And I saw Princely try to answer the question in a the right way. Let's just say that. And obviously his body language, his face showed you that's a player who has questions. I'll just leave it at that. I would encourage him to probably watch what he says. I appreciate how open he is with the media. I'm not telling him to not speak to us because I want the guys to be open with us. I just don't want him to put himself in the position where they're going to have questions about him and his buy-in here, because that certainly could be interpreted that way. Not saying I am. I'm just saying it could be by certain individuals in that building. So I found it to be curious. That's really all I'm going to say about that, because at this point in time, it doesn't really matter. Ejero's coming back. Princely's back next year. And Panthers got a lot to figure out. What they're going to have to figure out this offseason, though, is who there's going to have to replace Ickey Ekwonu at left tackle heading into next season, because Ickey ruptured his patellar tendon. It's unrelated to the knee injury that cost him the game against the Bucs back in week 16, but he did have a massive brace on his knee, his right knee, that is, in that game. He went out the second series on Saturday night and immediately was ruled out. Whenever that happens, that tells you it's bad. Dave said on Saturday night it was significant. The way the guys in the locker room were reacting, they knew it was significant, and it turned out to be significant. As, I mean, the timeline on this, Dave would not give us a timeline. Jimmy Graham, apparently this is something Joe Person brought up to Dave. He ruptured his and came back 9 months later to play. So if that's the case for Ickey, we're looking at October with him coming back. Go back to a couple of years ago when Austin Corbett tore his ACL in the last game of the season, and he was not really back until week 6 after the bye week, and he did not look right in the 4 games he played, and then he went out and was done for the season after he hurt his knee again. I'm guessing that we're probably not going to see a full Ickey Ekwonu until 2027. And that's not to say he won't come back this season. I just don't think we're going to see the player that we were watching this year, the last couple of years, again until 2027, just knowing how difficult it is to bounce back from injury and to get back to the same level that you were at, which now makes left tackle a significant need for the Panthers this offseason. I'm not saying to draft someone. They're going to just have to find, I think, a vet. And we'll talk about this as we'll do position previews for the offseason at some point in time. I'm going to map out the entirety of the next couple of weeks heading into free agency here on the show at some point here over the coming days. But we'll talk about what they do next as far as left tackle goes. But Ickey, who was up for an extension, Brant Tillis, who told us back, I asked him just about Ickey after they took care of Taylor Moton. I had asked him, I don't know if they had taken care of Taylor. Actually, that was before, because that was actually the day Taylor was emotional about just potentially being his last year in Carolina prior to him signing the extension. And Brant Tillis is back there watching the tears flow down his face and was really struck by that, obviously, because they got a deal done. And, obviously he's a human being. But I asked him, hey, what about Ickey? And he said they weren't there yet with Ickey. I would have guessed that they would have been there with Ickey now, considering how they handled things with Derek Brown and with J.C. Horn the last 2 years, where they let them play their 4th year after giving the 5th year option. And they did out with Ickey. Now, how does this impact negotiations and how they want to extend him if they want to do that at this point in time? So we'll see how that plays out with the left tackle, which is now a significant need for the Panthers this offseason. Looking at a couple other injury things, Rob Hunt, who was able to come back on Saturday night in that game after tearing his biceps tendon, which is crazy. He even came back and played. He then missed some time in that game on Saturday night because of a right pectoral injury. I asked him in the locker room at the game what he was dealing with. He said that it popped. He didn't think it popped off the bone, so that's why he came back in the game. And then I asked him on Sunday, hey, what's the deal with the pec? And he said he was about to have an MRI after that. So that's information we're not going to get anytime soon, sounds like. But he was able to come back and play, and it's a long off season. So I'm guessing there's going to be some sort of rehab there, but it does not seem to me to be a significant thing that will cost him any time next year. Jonathan Brooks, we got to talk to him for the first time in a long time on Sunday as well. He said there's still no timeline. He's hopeful to be available for the offseason program, but we do not know. It's been obviously a full year since he tore his ACL for the second time in that same knee back in November of 2024. So we'll see now, about 14 months removed, if getting to 16, 17, 18 months removed, he'll be good to go once the offseason program begins. I did speak briefly to Brady Christensen, who ruptured his Achilles tendon, just asked how he's doing. He said he's good, and asked, hey, are you hoping to be back here next year? We had the talk, and he said that it sounds like they want him back. So we'll see how that plays out. Pat Jones also went up to him momentarily, asked how the back was as he was out for the rest of the season after that back injury in week 3 at home in that win against Atlanta. And he said he's progressing well, and it sounds like he's on track to be back for the offseason program. So there's a couple injury updates. Rico Dowdle. A lot of y'all, after Rico ran all over the Dolphins, ran all over the Cowboys, and ran all over the Packers, we're talking about Rico has to be extended, has to be back in Carolina this season, or next season rather. And then things tapered off, where in the final half of the season, Rico failed to rush for over 60 yards rushing. Then on Saturday, was barely involved offensively on the ground. It was Chuba who ended up being the guy who got more snaps and more carries. And we talked to Rico on Sunday, and Rico didn't seem to be really interested in talking to us. Cody, who's one of the PR guys over at the Panthers, was talking to Rico, and Rico's like, hey, man, you're holding me up. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm not trying to talk to these guys. And I'm like standing there kind of laughing because I actually had to ask Rico about something else, because apparently there's like a really good smoothie place at this BP station across the street from my house, and he apparently goes there. I was like, hey, you got to put me on with these smoothies. Well, I did ask him about that, and then eventually a scrum came, and Rico answered our questions. Now, he was asked about his usage late in the season and how things played out, and did not seem to be happy about it. He had said that he wanted to be somewhere where he could get the bulk of the carries, and didn't understand why his usage went down late in the year. Now, he did mention that with Chuba and the other backs at the coach, that being Dave Canales, they got to find a way to get these guys involved, understood all of that. But that, to me, did not sound like a player that is that interested in coming back to Carolina. And considering that they have Chuba Hubbard, who they extended in the middle of last season in 2024, and that they have Jonathan Brooks coming off of 2 ACL tears, but he'll be back and ready to go, and Trevor Etienne, who they just drafted, I don't really see why they would bring him back and where he fits in financially and just game plan wise, considering the other 2 guys that they also have behind Chuba. So I think it's probably done with Rico being a Panther moving forward. Some other things, looking at it, like the general mood in the locker room, because that's someone asked me, hey, what was like just the feeling in the locker room? It wasn't even on Saturday night like a dejected place. Probably after the game, immediately they were, but they have a little cool off time before we get in there. There's a lot of guys who were obviously disappointed in the opportunity that they felt like they missed, a game that they certainly felt like they should have won. And I can agree with that that's the game they probably should have won on Saturday, but they did not. They were really hopeful looking towards the future. And they said, like, this is the standard now. We are a playoff team. That's something that Jalen Coker said. That's something that Derek Brown said. That's something that Robert Hunt said. Everybody was saying this is now the standard. And we'll see what they were able to do next season, because when you win a division, you play a first place schedule. And that first place schedule means at home, aside from playing, of course, the Falcons, the Saints, and the Bucks, you have the Bears, who are right now in the divisional round and have a hell of a play caller in Ben Johnson, who's got the most out of Caleb Williams. That's been a good defense. You have the Lions, who were still a good football team this year, even though they did not make the playoffs. You have the Ravens, who will have a new head coach, but will still have Lamar Jackson. You have the Bengals, Joe Burrow, pretty damn good player, bad head coach, but good player they have there. You have Seattle, who you struggled mightily with this past season. You have the Broncos, who are the number 1 seed in the AFC. Now, players will change, coaches will change, all that. Injuries will happen. We don't know when those games will be played. Those will all be factors in the result on that Sunday. But looking at this year, that is a 1, that is a 2, that's 3 playoff teams, including 2 of the best teams in the NFL, and then a team that just missed playoffs in the Lions and Ravens, And then the Bengals, where if Joe Burrow's healthy, they're a problem. You got to go on the road to Green Bay. You got to go to Minnesota. You have at the Browns. So that's a game that you look at. All right, that should be an easy one, I guess. At Pittsburgh, which is never easy for this organization, and at Philadelphia, who's going to have a new OC and some personnel changes, and we'll see how else everything else plays. But yeah, that's first place schedule. It will not be easy for Carolina at all. Now, one last thing I want to touch on. Dave Canales did say that Tyrell McMillan, Jalen Coker, those are the two guys moving forward as wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, which is a big old duh after how we saw things play out in the second half of the season, especially on Saturday night when Jalen Coker, if he had not already, announced himself to the NFL world. And I asked him, hey, have you basically proven that you are a guy who can make plays? Like, hey, I certainly hope I have done that after what he did in the second half of the year, especially on Saturday night. But then I asked Dave about Xavier Legette and how things are going to play with XL and what he needs to do. And this is what Dave had to say about XL.
Yeah, just keep grinding, keep working, connecting with Bryce, making sure that they're on the same page, making the plays when they come to him. You know, it's that simple. You know, when you get opportunities in this league, you know, this game, all the margins are so fine. It's just critical that when you're called upon, when your number's called, you know, you make the play. And that's how you build trust and that's how you get things back on track. But, you know, the thing I respect about Xavier is through this process, all he's done is work. All he's done is just continue to try to find ways. How can I help? And he continued to block, and he continued to be available. He was returning kicks yesterday, you know, and just finding ways to do that. And he's made of the right stuff. I have full faith and confidence that Xavier will bounce back and have an excellent year next year.
Full faith and confidence that Xavier will bounce back and have an excellent year next season. We'll see. Because he talked about execution. And I didn't play the clip, but he talked a lot about how the production that they got from Jalen and Tyrell McMillan this year was great. And that's why those two guys are in the spot that they're in. And XL did not produce. So that's why you saw his snaps reduced. That's why you saw him back there on special teams returning kicks, because he wasn't doing what they needed him to do. Now you could help them in blocking, but you did not trade up and get a guy in the first round to be a blocking wide receiver solely. And that's all you could depend on him to be. So we talk about what's real, what's fake. We'll find out, because that is something that is certainly worth monitoring heading into the offseason and whether he'll be back again in Carolina this upcoming year. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you on Friday as the weekly Friday mailbag is back. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter or Blue Sky to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday, as we are likely going to get a chance to react to what Dan Morgan had to say, as it sounds like he's going to talk to us here in the coming days. So all that more coming up here on Locked On Panthers.